hot topic since we learned the names George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, an unarmed teen dressed in a hoodie, carrying a fruit drink and a pack of Skittles, versus Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch leader with a gun. And with a not guilty verdict and more charges possibly in store for Zimmerman, civil charges, perhaps even federal civil rights charges, the issue of race is front and center once again. Joining me now, attorney Mo Ivory, host of the Mo Ivory Show, Buck Davis, a diversity and inclusion expert, and David Webb, co-founder of the NYC Tea Party and host of the David Webb Show on Sirius XM. Welcome, all of you. David, let's start with you. A mostly white jury, all women. Does Reverend Jackson have a point?
No, he doesn't, because he'd like to inject that there is a problem with white people making a decision on the evidence versus black people making a different decision on the evidence. What we're talking about here is not a cry for justice and due process, but a cry for justice the way he and, frankly, those that want to play into the race narrative would like this to play out. The fact is, this is a tragedy. I wish those two had never met. I think most Americans who are rational do. But here we have a case that was prosecuted in the courts, went through the system, and was decided by a jury, and that's how our system works.
Jake.
Buck, well, Mo, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yes, please. Play into the race narrative. When doesn't anything play into the race narrative? For you to say something like a jury of African Americans wouldn't have thought differently about evidence that was presented, of course they would have. Every juror comes into a case with their experiences of their life,
and they are capable of making a rational decision.
No matter what you want to say about it, they come in with their own experiences to decide what the evidence is presented according to how they feel about it. That is why we work so hard to pick juries. That is why we try to make a jury.
Let me jump in for a second. What exactly would an African American jury, in your view, and this is all obviously hypothetical, what evidence would they have looked at differently?
African American jury might not have looked at Rachel Jeantel and judged her the way everybody was judging her. It wouldn't have been about her language. It wouldn't have been about her tone. It might have been just about the facts that she knew that day. An African American jury would have looked at a lot of the evidence, including what wasn't done, what was started from the first moment that investigators pulled up on a dead 17-year-old African American boy shot by what appeared to be a white man. It would have all been different. So I just think it's ridiculous to act like there's no race issue here. We go into our court of law, we just look at facts and we make judgments. The justice system has never been about facts. It's facts plus what you think about the things that happen in our country, your experiences, what you've learned. So you bring all of that into a courtroom with you and onto a jury. So please stop pretending like this is not about race, David, because it is.
You present the interesting argument that everyone is only subject to their experience when making a decision based on the fact. Now, most people watching this will look at that and call it what it is and attempt to get an end result that you desire. There are blacks and whites who make decisions on juries in this country on a daily basis that are fair. And
Absolutely.
they may not be
First of
fair.
all, I was not saying that every decision is unfair.
You can't say absolutely,
I'm saying you bring your experiences into the courtroom. And African Americans have different experiences across the board. And so I'm saying that don't discount that you bring your life experiences, what has happened to you, into a courtroom. It is not so just all about, I love the argument, well, it's just our justice system. Our justice system is broken, David. That is why a man can walk away murdering a 17-year-old kid and just get away with it.
Let me jump in for a second.
Don't do the emotion thing. This is not about emotion. I'm not talking from an emotional. I'm talking about the facts. And I love it's always about the emotions when you're talking about the real situation.
So this is the problem with having people on a show who have their own radio shows. They're used to having all the control. Buck, poor little Buck. Let me go to you for 1 second. President Obama released a statement a short time ago about the verdict in this case, and it said, in part, the death of Trayvon Martin was a tragedy not just for his family or for any one community, but for America I know this case has elicited strong passions. It goes on and on. But there's one particular part I want to read to you, which is we should ask ourselves if we're doing all we can to widen the circle of compassion and understanding in our own communities. How do you interpret that?
Well, I am deeply disturbed by what I have been seeing, specifically with African American folks online and what they've been tweeting and saying in social media. If you look really closely at their words and you look at the meaning in the words and you look at the feeling underneath that, you'll see and hear the feeling of, I do not feel valued in this country. I don't matter. My life is not as important as other people in this country. From a humanitarian standpoint and a civility standpoint, that should be terribly troubling for every one of us in this country. This case did not create those emotions. That comes from decades and decades of people feeling like they are treated differently in this country, and it is just resurrected because of this terrible tragedy.
Exactly.
There's another point, however, that we're seeing on Twitter. These are the direct threats that are coming. These are the calls for violence. These are the videos that are now showing up in social media and new media from Portland to Oakland to others, where people are calling for violence, murder, and this is not what our system's about. Now, you can talk about why people feel a certain way. Those are all subjective feelings to a great degree for all of us. But if we stick within the issue at hand, the evidence that's presented, the case law as it stands, and we deal with it, I don't have a dog in this hunt. As I said, I wish these two had never met. But what we have seen since the Community Relations Service went down there, we now have the FOIA requests that show they were involved, the Department of Justice unit involved in leading rallies and funding and facilitating rallies against Zimmerman. Now that we see that we have Sharpton Jesse Jackson and others pushing a narrative, we have to pay attention to that end of it also.
David, if I could just jump in just with a quick fact check on the idea of these community relations service, what the Justice Department says, and you can believe it or not, but what the Justice Department says that those organizations were there to try to keep the peace, not to gin up anger. I mean, that's the explanation from the Justice Department, and if you look at the documents that the Judicial Watch FOIA'd through the Freedom of Information Act, there isn't anything that contradicts that. I'm sorry.
And Jake, also, David said that he saw a lot of tweets about, people wanting to protest and outrage over the verdict. And there have been just as many tweets that said nasty remarks about Trayvon and that he got what he deserved and that he was the one who did a crime. So let's be fair in the analysis of the tweets and make sure that we put out the other side as well of how many people are out there saying that Trayvon got just what he deserved. So there's equal amount of anguish and nasty tweeting going on both sides.
There is a lot of ugliness on both sides. I think we can all agree that nobody should be calling for violence against George Zimmerman and nobody should be saying that Trayvon Martin got what he deserved.
That's right.
I think this panel can come to an agreement on that, if nothing else.
Yeah.
I do want to play this public service announcement from Broward County, Florida, and get your reactions to that.